What's something innocent you did as a child that really screwed up someone else's life? Story 1, I'm not really sure if it screwed up his life. More, I think it just brought up a past he wanted to forget. But there was a kid I was friend with in middle school named Mike, and he would flinch really bad if you pretended to almost hit him. Me being a kid and not understanding how bad the world can be, I thought it was funny and messed with him all the time by pretending to hit him. Fast forward 5 or 6 years, and I found out his parents beat him as a kid, and he was forever traumatized by that. I'm sure I was triggering his PTSD every time I made him flinch, and ever since then I've felt so bad about it. I haven't seen him in over 5 years, but I really wish I could apologize to him for my ignorance. Story 2, I was on family vacation in Europe, at a train station, and I was like 13 on the platform. A European man asks me, a 13-year-old little American boy, if this is where the train to Paris will be arriving. I tell him yes, train to Paris arrives. We get on and find our seats. Suddenly a few people show up and have the same seat numbers as us. Oops, we got on the 1050 to southern France somewhere. We won the 1055 to Paris. The whole family gets off the train. As it pulls away, I make eye contact with the man who asked if the train went to Paris. I hope he had a nice vacation. Story 3, God. This reminds me of the most heart-wrenching story I've read on here. This one guy was describing how when he was younger, he was holding his dad's friend's gun and checking it out while reassured by the owner that it wasn't loaded. The dad's friend's daughter came out a door somewhere nearby, and the gun discharged straight at her and killed her on the spot. It was a terrifying disaster. I think the dad's friend eventually took his own life, and the families were never the same. It was so brutal to read about. I don't think I'll be able to find it using keywords, though we'll try. Story 4, I accidentally caught my uncle cheating on my aunt and apparently fessed up at the dinner table on Thanksgiving. I was about 6, and I don't remember the event. I remember everyone being in a rush to leave and ultimately not seeing my uncle again. Story 5, I was like 8 to 9 years old, and I found my cousin since I didn't know what it was. I asked my aunt. She asked where did I find it, and if I could find more, she would give a surprise. I found like 9 magazines. The surprise was ice cream and money for the arcade. Story 6, for whatever reason, I took a big dirty dump on the bathroom floor at school when I was 7. The teachers asked me later what was up, and I blamed it on my best friend. For some reason, he admitted it was him. The administrators sent him to be mentally evaluated, and he ended up on Ritalin for the next 15 years. Story 7, when I was 14, I was at my friend's house. His dad had a really nice late 60s, early 70s Chevelle. I think my friend and I were sitting there looking at it and talking about it, and being at that age when cars just seemed so cool, I wanted to see the engine. We popped the hood and looked for a while, and then slammed the hood and moved on. Well, the hood didn't latch properly, and the next time he drove it, the hood flew up, and he crashed the car. It was a 30-year-old car at the time, and a complete timepiece. His dad was going through a divorce at the time, because his mom cheated on him. So this guy was just trying to enjoy his nice classic car after his wife cheated on him, and it got destroyed. I still feel terrible about it. Story 8, I was about 5, and my aunt was driving us somewhere late at night on the highway. I remember seeing a full moon through the window on my side, and I urged my aunt to look out the window, saying, look, 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 it's so big, and pretty, look, look, look. She turned her head for a split second to look where I was so frantically pointing at, and in that short moment her eyes were off the road. A car slid in her lane with very little room to spare, and she ended up rear-ending it, and we got into a major accident. I remember having a few bruises and scratches on myself, but my aunt messed up her neck and back. It's been 18 years now, and she still has spinal problems. Story 9, I was bullied as a youngster in elementary school. 1980s, what did I do? I bullied the loneliest kid in school. I'm sorry, Zach, we should have been friends, and I resent my actions towards you. Sorry for throwing that basketball at your head while you were sleeping. Story 10, my cousin and I were trying to surf, which we had never done before. I couldn't paddle out past the wave because I was too small and weak. He stood behind me in waist-deep water with the intention of pushing me over the wave. The board dug into the water, and its buoyancy made it shoot back into his face. He can't see out of one eye properly now. Story 11, went fishing with my family near a river where some would float with their tubes and ice chests of beer. Well, there's a really famous cliff over this river, and kids love jumping off into the river for fun. Well, a couple who were just married were floating down the river, minding their own business, when I was given the okay to jump. When another kid gives you the okay, you don't second guess, you just jump and have fun. Turns out this kid didn't see the couple. I took off, jumped, and my knee directly hits the woman who was just married right at her nose. I come back up from under the water, and she's seen screaming with blood rushing down her face and into the water. I'm pretty sure I broke her nose. Breaking a nose is pretty much screwing someone's life up. Story 12, not sure if this qualifies because I don't exactly know what happened in this situation. But when I was growing up, my grandma owned a bar. My mom worked there, so I regularly hung out there during the day when it was basically a lunch restaurant. One of the regulars came in at about 3 or 4 p.m. and got a beer like he always did. I was joking with him and told him he should stay for a few more and enjoy the evening. He got a little sad and said, unfortunately, I'm too old for those kinds of things anymore, and no one wants to hang out with an old man like me. 12-year-old me didn't think anything of it and carried on about my day. My mom got off work about half an hour after the conversation with him, and we went home, picked up my dad, and went out to dinner. About halfway through dinner, my mom got a phone call from a friend at the bar. The regular had gone home and killed himself. Right after he left the bar, he went home and blew out the pilot light on his oven and laid down on his couch. His son came over to visit him later that evening and found him, but it was too late. I don't blame myself for what happened, but if I had only known, I would have stayed and told him that I wanted to hang out with him. Story 13, there was an event at the community center where volunteers were helping kids sign up for summer camps. The tables were placed right in front of the vending machines. Remember this. This is important. Anyways, me being the impish 6-year-old I had a habit of sticking my hand into every little nook and cranny on the vending machines, hoping to score a sweet quarter or something. Imagine my joy when I stuck my hand into a machine and scored an unopened pack of tropical Starburst. Yeah, the green pack for 6-year-old me. That was the jackpot. Anyways, went back to my parents with my haul, and they were a bit surprised, but hey, the packaging wasn't open, so they let me keep it. As we were walking out the community center, I recall seeing a very distraught teenager banging against the machine. It dawned on me a few years ago that he probably paid for the Starbursts, turned around to help an impatient parent, and then found out that his Starburst ceased to exist. Pretty sure I ruined that guy's life, and subsequent faith in vending machines. Story 14, I was playing baseball in grade 5. It was my turn to bat. I missed the ball when it was pitched. In slight frustration, I swung my bat back in the other direction without looking. The ball ended up directly behind me after it was thrown. The bat catcher had walked up to grab it without me noticing. I cracked him in the head, knocked him out, split his head open, and he had to go get stitches and was gone from school for a few days. Not sure if I could say it ruined his life, but I definitely made any future concussions he gets more risky. Story 15, dug a hole in my parents' backyard, got several feet deep, and happened upon a cable running through the ground. It was in our way of digging to China, so we cut it. To this day. I don't know what it went to, but I'm sure it made someone's life. Story 16, when I was 4 or 5, I was molested by my aunt, and it gave me a really warped sense of how people react with each other. I had this friend, and I stayed over at her grandma's house with her. I decided to play the fun games my aunt taught me. We played these games until I was 6. Turned out I was outright abusing my best friend. Years and years later in high school, we sat down and talked about it. It really with her vie on relationships. She's very jumpy when it comes to it all, and I will never not feel guilty. If you ever see this, I'm still so freaking sorry. Story 17, mine is pretty mild. I have no recollection of it, honestly. I've only heard the story from my dad. When I was 4, going on 5, I got my dad a ticket. He got pulled over, I think, for speeding, and I was sitting in the front seat. Back then, the booster seat laws were a lot more lenient. You needed to be 5 or over a certain weight to not be sitting in a booster seat. Well, I was in the front seat, not in a booster, and just barely not 5 yet. The officer asked my father how old I was, and he says that I'm 5. Being the little I was, I screamed from my seat, no, I am not. I am 4. Yeah, he did get a ticket. No guarantee it was because of my big mouth, but I'm sure it didn't help. Story 18, wouldn't say I screwed someone else's up, but when I was in maybe grade 4, my friend told me that her dog got put to sleep the day before. I didn't understand what it was and responded with, so, ITLL, just wake up. I still feel terrible about it, especially now having dogs of my own and knowing how hard it is to let them go, never mind trying to talk about it with a friend, and then being... Story 19, when I was around 8, my parents would babysit the little girl of a family friend who was a year or 2 younger than I was. Now that I'm older, I realize her dad was really abusive, but at the time I had no idea. Also, both our parents were horrible alcoholics, and I was oblivious. When she came over, she would hide food in our house in weird places, would find bananas under the couch, bread in the crack between the bed and the wall, Halloween candy in the fireplace, etc. I thought she was stealing, so I always told my mom when I found it, and she got in trouble. I found out later that her dad wouldn't feed her at home, so she was stashing extra food at our house because she was hungry. As an adult, I feel like such a horrible person for telling on her. I still remember when I realized what a monster he was, and this was also my fault. She had got a new pair of shoes, very rare. Most of her clothes were old, torn and dirty, and there were these plastic bubbles on the sides that had one Polly Pocket inside each bubble. Polly was very popular at the time, and we had several of the tiny homes. Well, we wanted the Polly Pockets, and against her hesitation, I talked her into cutting the bubbles open with scissors so we could get them out. Brand new shoes, ruined. She got in huge trouble, and I lied and said it was her idea. I will never forget what took place that night. Her dad whipped her bare bottom in our living room with the buckle end of a belt while I cried, and nobody stopped him. I was so scared he would whip me too that I didn't speak up. Then he made her walk up and down our gravelly street with no shoes, by herself for almost an hour to teach her to appreciate things. It was also close to midnight. That was the last time I ever saw her. I heard she was taken to live with her grandparents in Michigan. I never got to apologize, and I will remember the sound of her crying for the rest of my life. I wish I could remember her name. Everything else is so vivid, and I still feel so guilty for the trauma she must have sustained from my actions. I really hope she is doing okay now and got away from her horrible dad. Story 21 day, when I was 7-ish, I was supposed to walk my friend home. She lived directly across the street, but we got into a fight, so I didn't. She ended up getting kidnapped and brutally raped. The guy tried to kill her too. I haven't seen her since. I've heard she lives across the country now. I wish I could tell her I'm sorry. Story 21 when I was 10, hung out with these 3 brothers around my age. I had known them since we were little. At the end of their street was this empty lot with hills and ditches that we would play war in all the time. We made all these catapults in hidden rooms made of pallets we found. We loved it. Well, one day Ben, who was the middle child, came up to me after I had made another catapult. I had a brick on there to launch. We always mess with each other, pulling pranks and whatnot. Well, Ben is standing above the brick, and I decide I'm going to lightly press down and CK him out with the brick. I totally underestimated my weight, and I sent it flying straight into his face. I busted his head open, above his eye. Blood went everywhere, his brothers, and I panic. I feel awful. I still feel awful about it. We run to get his parents. I was never allowed to come to their house ever again after that. They banned me. Even though it wasn't intentional, I saw Ben years later at a store I worked at, and he was super nice to me, but I couldn't help looking at the huge scar on his face and thinking I caused that. I still get sick to my stomach when I think about it. Sorry, Ben. If I could take my horrible joke back, I would. Story 22, OMG, I have a great story for this. 3rd grade, I had a bathroom graffiti phase. One day, I wrote some girl like some boy all over every stall in huge letters in pen. The next day, I noticed someone traced over it with a marker. I was like, hey, imitation is the greatest form of flattery. Felt like a. Later that day, the disciplinary lady came in and asked all girls to take out their pencil boxes, then asked who had black markers, myself, and my Crayola marker accompanied boss lady with 2 other girls with black markers to the bathroom. Had us all draw a line on the stall. Mine and another girl's wiped right off, as they were washable. Girl 3, though, had a Sharpie. She burst into tears and got suspended and blamed for my crime, and they pinned her for the previous months of bathroom graffiti. I watched it all happen and didn't say a word. She even admitted to tracing it over, and they were like, yeah, right, you're out of here. Story 23, I got obsessed with spies and the idea of people infiltrating the country. Some innocent trucker pulled up on my block, and I slid down the grassy hill by the road and set up some homemade nail strips in front of his tires and burst them. Heard more cuss words that day than I thought one human could produce. Story 24, not sure if this is really screwing up someone's life, but definitely some innocence lost. When I was 6, in kindergarten, I was sitting at a table making some art for Christmas with 3 other kids. One of the kids, a kid I didn't like, was going on and on about how Santa was going to bring him so many gifts, and I was getting annoyed. Being raised an atheist, I never believed in Santa Claus. I finally snapped and said, you know, Santa's not real, right? To add to it, the poor boy bothering me was a special needs kid and was so distraught by my news that he yelled Santa's not real, so that the whole class could participate in his upset. My teacher put me in timeout, but I had no idea why. I didn't understand that I was up those kids' childhoods. I thought I was just informing them. They all went home and had to ask their parents if I had lied or not. I feel horrible for ruining like 30 kids' belief in Santa. Story 25, when I was around 8 or 9, me and some friend decided to make a corn maze in some random farmer's field. We didn't ask him, didn't know him, didn't think about the fact that he didn't want a corn maze in his field. We just thought it would be awesome fun. Poor guy, we probably did hundreds of dollars of damage. Story 26, we were all supposed to bring in rocks for an experiment for class in elementary school. I overheard the kid who bullied me say that if this one rock he had, which was his brother's, disappeared, his brother would kill him. I stole it. I have no clue if his brother got upset or not. I hate myself to this day for it. And still have issues looking at hematite, the rock I took. I just wanted him to feel some of what he made me feel, and I blocked a lot of that time out of my memory, since it was so traumatic that I don't even remember the kid's name. So I can't even apologize at it in retrospect. It wasn't really innocent, nor am I sure it messed up his life. Story 27, can't remember the whole thing, but apparently when my sister and I were young, we told our bus driver that the guy she was dating was also dating our mom. She told us his name, and we said, oh, we know someone who's named that too, and began to tell her about him. I don't think we ruined her life, but at least we stopped him from cheating on anyone else. My mom still likes to bring that story up today, though, about how we talk too much as kids, LOL. Story 28, not something I did to someone else, but something my dad said to me. When I was in like 2nd grade, 8 years old, I had a serious boyfriend, as in like dated since kindergarten. Big deal for an elementary school relationship, haha. My twin brother invited him to our 8th birthday party, and at some point during it, I kissed him. Nothing intense, it was either a peck on the lips or cheek. Well, my dad found out and took me away from the party and scolded me, telling me I was too young to be kissing boys. He said this within earshot and view of the other parents who were eating with my mom and dad, and it was really embarrassing. I'd never really gotten in trouble as a kid, so this was a big deal to me. I immediately broke up with him the next day and didn't date anymore. It sounds really harmless when it's written out like that, but it really messed me up for a while. I'm an HSRN and still haven't had a since then because it's still deep-seated in me that be disappointed with me if I do. I just wish he would have said it in a way that made me feel less ashamed of myself for doing something that is pretty normal. Apparently, when I was 13 years old, I seduced a 50-years-old married man. I screwed up his life when I confessed what was happening. Story 29. In high school, I was on a trip with my drama club, and it was late, so obviously we were racing up and down the halls of our hotel. Actual foot races. I was winning one, and just as I passed the door to my hotel room, my friend Matt, who was in the same room as me, got up from where he was kneeling. But he got up by pushing himself forward, and the moment I passed the door, my knee connected with the side of his face. He ended up with a shattered face, concussion, memory problems. He wanted to be an EM fireman, but last I heard more than a decade ago, he wasn't able to pass the exam certifications because he couldn't remember important information. Story 30. Kicked a football while playing in the backyard with my siblings when I was 10. Ball flew over fence. Our neighbor was a middle-aged lady who had her mother and some other person sitting outside drinking tea. When I saw the ball fly over, I started worrying, which was right. All I heard was the sound of glass and plates shattering. I then ran inside since I had this gut feeling that I just screwed up on a massive level. 5 minutes later, that someone else rang our bell and said they just sent the neighbor's mother to HR funeral. I still feel like. Story 31. When I was little, my dad was a stay-at-home and my mom worked. We were immigrants living in practical poverty, most meals coming from food pantries. Parents digging in recycling bins weekly to find cans to recycle for the return money. There was a day when I decided to clean my room, and I did it by just pulling everything out of the closet onto the floor by kid logic. This makes total sense. I found a broken purse, surprisingly heavy, stuffed with cash stuffed. Obviously, I was excited as heck and ran it directly to my dad. Turns out my mom was saving up to leave us. Whoops. Story 32. I don't know if this is relevant to the question, but here goes. When I was in middle school, 2003 to 2005, I was in a Magic the Gathering and had a few friends who were as well. They'd come over after school and we'd all play. Coming from a better-off family, I had a lot of good cards for that time. One day, after they had been over playing, I noticed quite a few of my good cards missing. Later that day, I also noticed 100 missing from my wallet. It just been my birthday and was a gift from my grandparents. I got the police involved, and they were pulled into the office at school and questioned. Ultimately, they confessed after trying to deny it at first. One of them received community service and had to work to pay me back the 100. The other one, though, he ended up having a psychotic break from the whole ordeal, destroying a bunch of his mom's furniture in a rage, was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and was shipped off to a mental facility for a while. He's got his life together somewhat, but last I checked, he's still a cashier at the local grocery store. TLDR friends stole from me in middle school, and one of them ended up having a complete meltdown and ruining his own life. Story 33. When I was younger, my best friend's parents were a gay couple, and I spent a lot of time with them. One time we were like 7 or 8 years old, and I was with my friend and his parents, and they took us to an event at a restaurant and beach club. I don't remember exactly what the event was, but it was specifically meant for the gay community, so there were a lot of gay couples there. Anyway, the next week I went into school and said that my friend's parents took me to a gay club. I guess by the time it got to my friend's parents, the story became that I said they took me to a gay strip club. They took some flack from the school and other parents, and I was made to apologize to them. But I didn't say anything in a negative way. I had a wonderful time. Anyway, there was no love lost between my friend and I. We're still amazing friends 15 years later. However, his parents and my parents were very close friends before that incident, and have hardly spoken all this time, and my relationship with them is still a bit strained. Story 34. Dad was a malignant narcissist, drug addict, and abuser. He treated my mom and half-sister like garbage. When I was in kindergarten, he tried to kill Mom, and she took us kids and fled in the middle of the night to her parents' house, fully resolved to leave him for good. But she let me talk to him on the phone. He would tell me how sad he was and how lonely, and how much he missed me. So I begged Mom over and over to go back to him. After a few months, she broke down and the abuse resumed, and Mom was too demoralized to leave again. My sister was so traumatized by him that she dropped out of high school. My mom stayed with him until he threatened to kill me when I was 16. She died, never having been loved or treated well by a man. My sister is in an abusive marriage, and I'm in the process of my second divorce. How different would things have been for all of us if I hadn't begged Mom to go back? Story 35. Once when I was a little kid, I was mad at my babysitter for whatever reason. So I said, "Allison, guess what?" Then I leaned in and said, "You're fat." She was only like 19 and was really fat. "I'm sorry for making your life worse, Allison." Story 36. When I was a kid, two of my cousins on my mom's side babysat me a few times. One of the cousins was 11 years older than me. She would hang out with me if she took me to her house after school because her mom was there. But if she took me to my house where there were no adults present, she would just watch TV the whole time and ignore me until my parents got home. I eventually told my mom that all she did when she was there was watch TV, and she got really mad and fired her. The other cousin was about 5 to 6 years older. When he babysat me, he played with my dad's guitars. I remember just sitting there while he played with them, and we talked a bit. He apparently left one of the amps on, and my parents noticed it later, and I told them that my cousin had played with them. They again got mad and fired him from babysitting me. Story 37. When I was about 15, I was carrying my cousin, who was about 2 at the time, from the kitchen to the garage, as he was and my aunt were heading to their car. Little did I know that the tiled hall floor was what was snowing, and we later assumed that the snow brought in on people's boots made the floor wet anyway. As I walk out, I slipped and fell on top of my cousin, which ended up breaking his leg. Still feel bad, as he says it hurts in cold weather. So although an accident, I'm pretty sure Eve ruined his life by providing him with early arthritis. Story 38. Didn't screw up a life, but my dad takes anxiety pills, and my mom takes pills for medicine. CPS interviewed my little brother over an issue with my older brother, and he said that they did a lot of pills. Story 39. As a very young child, I was asked to be a flower girl in my aunt's wedding. I told her over the phone, "Nah, but maybe next time you get married." I just assumed that was how life worked, people marrying, and then splitting and remarrying. And apparently it really hurt my aunt's feelings that I was so dismissive of the permanence of her upcoming marriage. Haha, guess that's 5-year-old for congrats on nuptials. Story 40. Danced with another girl in the school dance when I was dating this other lass. We were like 12, so I couldn't resist the beauty that was that girl in the moment. With the music and whatnot, we won second place in the dance competition as well. Don't know why I remember that though. Maybe because I've not had a girlfriend since that 12 years ago. Yikes. Story 41. I've told this story on Reddit before, but when I was around 11 to 12 years old, I let a neighbor know that I'd seen her husband coming out of the house of a nearby single mom whose daughter was in my class at school. I was just curious about why I had been there, and I had a bit of a crush on the daughter. They were divorced shortly after that. I didn't put together for years. Edit the silver lining as they got back together and remarried about 15 years later. Story 42. One time when I was 8, I asked another kid what the thing in his ear was. He immediately started crying and told the teacher, who sent me to the principal for bullying. The kid had a hearing aid. I was curious. Meant no harm. I actually had tubes put in my ears years before and was told one day, "You'll need a hearing aid." I sympathized with the kid. Got suspended anyway. Story 43. When I was very young, my mother put me in my booster seat in the back of the car and then proceeded to the rear to load stuff into the boot. I, being a mischievous little, got myself out of my seat and took the handbrake off. The car then rolled backwards over my poor mother and broke both of her legs. Screwed her life up for a good while there. Story 44. Minor, but I still think about it. When I was 10ish, I was going somewhere with my father. He had put shorts on, which was unusual. I laughed. He never wore shorts again. Story 45. When I was little, probably around 5 years old, I picked up one of the small dogs that ran around in my grandmother's yard. I wasn't very good at it, and the dog fell and broke its leg and had to have it amputated. For years, I'd go to my grandma's house, and as I got older, I felt worse and worse seeing that poor dog hobble around on 3 legs. I also used to go there and play with my aunt's toys that were stored in the patio. No one really paid attention to it, and my aunt had one of the original Barbie dolls and also the original Ken doll. They probably got trash from us playing with them and eventually were thrown away by someone. Many years later, when they became really valuable, my aunt began to question me frequently about what could have happened to the dolls. I felt bad, but I was a kid then, and what could I do? Story 46. Bringing my Muslim neighbor alcohol while his imam was in the room. He was really nice, and as kids, when we did something nice for him, he usually gave us money. So on my birthday, he drank 1 bottle and left the other. I decided to be nice and go over to his house to give him. I think I went over there and screamed, "You forgot your drink," while holding a beer. I remember his wife screaming for me to leave the house immediately. I was confused. Later on, they came to my parents' house to explain what happened. My parents later explained to me. They were still nice to us anyways. Story 47. I'll give 2. One I did and one my mom did. When I was in middle school, we all had to write an essay for DARE. Hey, erased the problem that I thought cigarettes were drugs because I was a stupid 6th grader. I wrote an essay about how my dad did drugs, sometimes with me in the car and the windows up. Well, my essay was one of the winners, and I read it aloud to my grade. Word got out to my dad's friends and coworkers, and he had to explain he wasn't a drug addict. Smoking in a car with your kid is still a thing to do, but not as bad as drugs, my mom told me, and I felt horrible. I remember my mom was driving me to a basketball game in middle school. We were running late, and she was driving fast down this country road. Two small dogs ran out in the road, and she hit both of them with her front tire. I was scarred, but she was mad, so she said, "Get over it," and kept driving. I still think about it sometimes, and I feel bad for the people whose dogs those were. If it were our dogs, I know I'd be pissed, but she acted like it was no big deal. Story 48, in grade 3 or 4, my friend had a crush on the student teacher. I thought it would be funny to write a love note to my friend pretending to be the student teacher. She thought it was real and showed everyone the love note, including the real teacher. The student teacher ended up having an investigation against him. Story 49, not me, but I had a friend who was playing with matches in a forested strip about 10 miles long that neighborhoods backed up against. And yes, what happened is exactly what you were thinking. I think he told me it caused something like 50 M in damage in mid-1970s money. Story 50, slid down the slide while my sister was going up. She fell off the slide and broke her arm. She's been having issues with that arm ever since. It's been 11 years. Story 51, as kids, me and my brother had a 9-year-old babysitter called William. Me being an immature 5-year-old at the time, I thought it was funny that his name was William. So I made a joke to my mom and said that William played with my brother Willie. It got him in trouble. Story 52, little late to the party. I wasn't a child, but I was young enough to not really know the weight of what I was doing. I had a friend from another state in middle school, would text back and forth, and had come to me for advice every once in a while because I usually do give okay advice, but with the old but do I know disclaimer. He talked to me one day and said he had some older friends that were trying to get him to try smoking marijuana and drinking. Well, I was all into being scientific about things, so I did a little bit of research and said to him that the risk is likely very minimal, and that while it probably isn't a good idea, no real harm would come to him from it. Him trying turning in partying every weekend with these guys. He graduated from weed and beer to coke and hard liquor. He became addicted, started doing a lot more drugs, sold drugs to buy more, etc. He nearly died of an OD, and now he's in rehab. I can't help but blame myself. Story 53, when I was about 7 years old, I saw a little girl kicking and screaming as a man put her in a car. I thought she was just throwing a fit with her parent. Later on, I saw the same little girl on a missing poster all over my neighborhood.